Welcome to the Lichi Translation podcast. I'm Michal Heffer, manager of Lichi Translations. We offer multilingual translation and interpretation services in all languages. In this podcast, I chat with clients, talented professionals, and fascinating people I've met along the way. We'll share tips from various fields along with insights into the translation process. So let's get started. Today, I'm very, very honored and very happy to have Professor Dan Ariely on the call. Hi, Dan.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for joining me.
Of
And
course.
just a little introduction about Dan, a professor of psychology and behavioral economics from Duke University. And you write about irrational decision-making. You've published 8 books, and you've translated them into how many languages?
The first one, I think, a little bit more than 40.
Wow, 40 languages. What does a translated book do to your career?
So, partially it's kind of curious because it's hard to know until you get to a country. Also, in my case, because I have such in the last few years, I have such a distinctive half a beard.
Yes.
Because of my injury, I think people recognize me a bit more. So, if in the years when I had no half a beard, I looked a little odd because of the scars on this side. But with the half a beard, people see me, and I think they notice me more. So I think there's almost not an airport that somebody doesn't say hi.
Is that beautiful? That's
in a nice way.
amazing. How
It is very
nice.
nice, yes.
So wherever you travel, people recognize. Wonderful.
Yeah, and then of course I get lots of emails from people around the world. I get exposed to new things, sometimes. So I write about human nature and irrational behavior. Some people write from other countries, tell me about different customs and different approaches, different mechanisms. Overall, I would say that translating a book, if you get feedback from it, if you just send it to another country and you don't get anything back, there's not much in it. But if you do get feedback from it, it's a very fulfilling experience and gives you another layer. And I'm now writing kids books, and in the kids books I put a special email at the end of the book, and I ask the kids to write me.
Oh, how nice.
So I'll see how it will
You'll see
work
what
out.
happens, yes.
Yeah.
Because, many people do require translation because they want to reach new audiences and provide their knowledge to, all over the world. And obviously English won't be enough. I mean, lots of people read English. It's an international language, and you have English readers anywhere you go. However, I assume, translating into Vietnamese and Chinese and Japanese will open your ideas and thoughts to so many new people. And would you get maybe interesting job opportunities or lecture invitations?
Yeah, lots of lecture invitations. In my case, I get lots of things from universities, sometimes governments. It's kind of an interesting, a book is a kind of an amazing, think about how many things do we create almost from cover to cover that is ours at that level. Very, very few things are like that. If whatever you work on, you're a small cog in a big machine. You add a little bit, let's say you work on software, maybe there's a routine in it that is yours, but there's very few things in life that you feel are yours in the way that a book is yours. And of course there's designers and their editors and their translators, but still it feels very much like yours. And the other thing about the book, the physical book, is that you can put it on the shelf and it's finished. Even a digital book, at least it's finished. I had this dream or nightmare at some point that Amazon called me up and said, all your books on Kindle, you can keep on editing them forever.
Oh, wow, that'd be
And
terrible.
it's
Yes.
terrible because finishing
You'd have to,
something is
it's
so
an
nice,
achievement. Yes.
and there's so many things we never finish because the digital life can help us edit and edit and edit. I think there's actually something very nice about the
Like
book,
a full
about the
stop.
fact that it's yours, that it's finished, it's a chapter in your life. So it's very, very nice.
And actually, we've known each other for most of our lives in a way because we are third cousins. So
Yep.
I do remember you from my childhood, but then we weren't in touch for many, many years. But and then our first kind of professional interaction was when you were translating your book from English into Hebrew. We say we are both Israelis. We both also Americans. In our passports, you spend much more time than I have in the U.S., but we both have U.S. passports. And so when you translated your book into Hebrew, we had a brief interaction when we were checking how AI would influence the translation of the book, or how can we use AI in the translation process. And even though you already had a translator, right? She was already working
Yep.
on the book. We prepared a little sample just so she could get, I mean, you already had a contract with her. Everything was already closed, but we wanted to see if like the AI, the machine translation version would help her in the process or not.
Yep.
And
So
how did she react to that?
first of all, I should say that I speak English and Hebrew, so I don't know much about the other translations of my books. The Hebrew experience is interesting. So I write in English, and then somebody translates it because translation is a profession. It's I don't know if I could start writing it from scratch from Hebrew, but translation I wouldn't. So somebody translates it, and then what I do is I go sentence by sentence and I change almost every sentence. I'm saying maybe 95% of the sentences I change. Some are small, some are large. Some I do localization. I change holidays. I change social custom cultures. So I'm sure that all the languages that are just translated are missing something very deep about the localization. And then I think that's the interesting thing about AI is I remember my first book was translated. I talked to the translator. I said, it reads like a translated book. I want it to be written as if it was written in this language. And she said, that's not my job. I can't take responsibility for changing those things and make them localized. And I understand that. I think translation is a separate activity from localizing a book.
So even though most times, well, we would always use a native speaker, and a translator takes the content and translates it into his own language or her own language, and we do expect some sense of not changing, and it also depends on the context and the type of material, but to give a local tone to the text.
But for example, I wrote in Predictably Irrational. I write about Thanksgiving dinner, and I write a story that somebody comes to the end of Thanksgiving dinner and is opening his belt a little bit and relaxing and saying to his mother-in-law, "Oh, mother-in-law, this was such an amazing dinner. You worked so hard." He takes his wallet and he said, "Let me give you $200. You know what? $400." and then the family gets unhappy in the story. But the notion is that when you pay for a social good, it actually changes the relationship. So money, it's easy to change money to local currency, but the thought
Holidays
about
also. Yeah.
Thanksgiving, what do you do with Thanksgiving, or what do you
Yes.
do with American colleges, and
Yes.
what is the relationship between in a family? When is like in which culture is the main relationship with the mother versus the father? I mean, there's all kinds of things like that. So I'm imagining a day in which AI will help translate, but it would also be able to point to the localization. So imagine I'm translating to language X. I don't speak language X, but the interface is saying, you're talking about the holiday here, and here's a different holiday in this country. Do you want to change it to that country? Or you're
Wonderful,
talking about this
yes.
kind of relationship. And one of the things you showed me that I liked a lot was that we can imagine that an AI model would learn me. So I wrote 8 adults books so far, but you can imagine they would be learning across the books, right? I have a style and so on.
You could compare, yes.
But you can also imagine learning across authors. So if many authors choose to that to think in one way about a loving romantic relationship in one country, and they think that something is different in the translation to another. Like, I can imagine that you would feed books in different languages. Like in my case, I have validated the Hebrew version. You can take my
Yes.
English version, I can take my Hebrew version, and you can look at the differences.
And it might be
And
very different because you've made the changes that you wanted.
that's right.
And I think it's very interesting that you, when you translate into Hebrew, you can definitely make these changes. But if it's translated into Chinese, you
That's
cannot
right.
do that. So most of the translated books, you have no idea what's written,
That's right.
except for some of the comments you receive. And then I'm thinking maybe some things you want to change, but you don't always have to change, because if, let's say, it's important for you to convey the Thanksgiving atmosphere,
That's right.
you'd leave it. But if it's just an example, you could change it into a local
That's right.
holiday.
That's why I think that it will be an interactive model. I don't think I would want to give it
Totally to a, yeah.
full automated control, but I would like
Yes.
to say, okay, here's a holiday, here's the equivalent, read a little bit about it, see if you want to change it or not.
Because
Or
even when we work with AI, it would always be supervised by the translator. It's not that we would take the book, throw it into the engine, and then take it out and publish it. It has to go
yeah,
many, many cycles, and a translator has to go and compare every single sentence with the source and the target language to make
yeah,
sure that it's well translated and it's fluent and there's no kind of mistakes, because AI can still bring, you're talking about
yeah,
tomatoes and it can give you cucumbers. It can do whatever it wants. So you'd have to edit it very, very carefully.
yeah.
And I think I remember also you said that at the end you decided for this book not to use the AI. And I think it was the translator's decisions, because she said it's not the voice that she's interested in.
So that was also interesting, and that's probably different for different things. So, when I started writing my first book, I knew how to write academic language. I had no clue about how to write a general audience book. And I spent almost 6 months just working on one chapter.
Oh.
I would work on one chapter, I would show it to my agent, he would show it to people he was working with. And one of the things that came out at the end, academic writing is very dry and straightforward.
But you're always very funny. You're amusing. It's wonderful.
you.
You talk like when you write, it's like a very simple text,
Yeah.
simple way.
And I ended up writing very much the way I talk. Like, if you know me, so you can read the books and you can
Yes.
hear my voice in the back. And that, I think, is an interesting thing. It's not true for all books, or
Not
certainly
all
not
types
for
of
legal
text. Because some things you
contracts.
don't need a voice. You don't
That's
need
right.
in a contract you don't need a voice. But maybe in a
That's
personal
right.
book you do. You would like it.
That's right. But in my case, I think if a model was built on that, I would have also liked it to have me read the book in what I intend the intonation and tonality to be, and then take that into consideration. Anyway, so I think we're
Yeah.
kind of at the beginning, but I see so many opportunities for
Yeah.
how it could grow.
Okay, and now I also want to move on to another translation project we just recently concluded, and and that relates to what's going on here in Israel. And there's a new book titled "The Dark Legacy: Netanyahu's Abandonment of October 7th Hostages," and this is a terrible crisis and a sad situation. And Israel and the world, as I'm sure many people are seeing this in the news, but there are still 100 or so hostages held in Gaza, and they're not being released. And the families of the hostages have gathered leading people from Israel and maybe from around the world to write articles into this book. And we translated your article into English. So maybe, first of all, you could, I mean, all I do is go out and demonstrate and I shout and release the hostages, seal the deal. And, it's a devastating situation. I'd like to hear from you what brought you to write an episode, or like an article for this book. And maybe you can also tell us a bit of your insight about what's happening here in the country.
Okay, so there's no end to the amount of time we can describe the misery that is centered now around the Middle East. But I do think it's a beginning of a type of a third world war. Israel is now attacking Gaza, Lebanon. We have attacks from Syria, from Iran, from the Houthis. Things are happening in the anti-Jewish demonstrations in Europe and the US. This is really bigger than Israel and Gaza, and there's lots to say about that big topic. But maybe I'll say just a little bit about what I wrote. There's just a lot of elements, but I wrote about what is called complete and incomplete contracts. So in the world we have incomplete contracts, and incomplete contracts, they're just not written out. A marriage contract is very incomplete. For better and worse, we'll make it work. On the other hand, you can have a very, very detailed contract that try to capture everything. If this happened and this happened and this happened and so on. Now, it's very hard to write complete contracts, and incomplete contracts have their value. And in fact, sometimes when you try to take an incomplete contract and make it complete, you make it worse. And I'll tell you a story. There was a woman who managed a company for many, many years. She was in her 70s. She started when she was in her 20s. And she told me that when she was young, all her contracts were handshake. And she said, things would happen, and the contractors, and she would call them up, and they would fix things. She said, now lawyers come into the picture, and they start talking about all kinds of low probability effects. Look, what will happen if your thing poisoned my customers? And what happened if you have a data leak? And she said, when they finish these discussions, there's no goodwill in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
She
It's goodwill.
said that if she calls the supplier and said, hey, we agreed on 300 kilos, I need 330, can you make it work? They used to say, sure. Now they said, it will be twice the amount of money. I don't have time for that. So incomplete contracts are very, very special, when we handshake. And I'll give you another example. Soon after I got into hospital, maybe kind of the end of year one, this was a rehabilitation hospital. There was a guy that tried to dismantle a landmine, and it exploded in his hands. And he got injured in his legs. He lost both hands, one below the elbow, one above the elbow. He lost one eye. Anyway, very, very tough injury. And he had a girlfriend, and 3 weeks into it, she left him. She said she didn't sign up for this deal, and she left him. And me and all the other injured people, we would get together from time to time, like, in physical therapy and so on. And we talked about that. And one of the discussion was, okay, she was his girlfriend for about a year. what would have happened if they were engaged? What would have happened if they got
Or
married?
married, yes.
Now, all of us, we know that you can get married and you can get divorced, you can get engaged and get unengaged. It's not, but we all felt that it's a different contract, right? There's something about a handshake that is different. There's something about saying, "Would you marry me?" at some point, and there's something about wedding vows that really change how people look at their commitment and obligations. Anyway, all of this is a long introduction to say that countries have incomplete contracts with their citizens. And, the hostages are, it's a very different case. People outside of Israel, I don't think, don't understand hostages. Hostages are not prisoners. They are not soldiers. There were some people who went to a party. There were some people that were taken from their homes. It's a very different contract between what we think. It's true that a life is a life. I'm not making light of any life on either side, but there's something very special, very, very, very heavy about hostages. What is our commitment to our citizens? And what I wrote about is this idea that we have this contract, and the contract is, I'm a soldier, I expect this, and so on. I'm a citizen, I expect this, and so on. And the feeling of abandonment of the hostages is extra tough, and it's creating an erosion of the contract. When you think you have a contract, this is what I get, and it's an incomplete contract, so you never specified it. But all of a sudden you say, oh my goodness, if Hamas comes and take me from my bed and hold me this, the country is, our prime minister doesn't feel that his number one obligation is to release it. His obligation is to other things. Have I lived in this country for X years in the wrong feeling of a wrong contract? So it is about Israel, it is about Netanyahu, but I think this question about incomplete contract is much larger and much more important, and we should think about it much more, because incomplete contracts are incredibly beneficial. Like,
think about the people in Israel serve 3 years in the army, or 2 to 3 years, and some people stay longer. So we are, as citizens, we are spending, we are committed to the country, both as a military reserve. We're paying our taxes. We're going according to the laws of the country. Now, there's no contract for me to go according to law. Obviously, there's a price to pay if I don't do it. But it's my goodwill to do the things for the country. And then if the country doesn't come to save me when I expect them to do that,
that's right. Where does it say? Yeah. And I think in Israel, before we started, I'm leaving tomorrow back to the US, and you asked me, what do I feel more like, Israeli or American? One of the very special things about Israel is, I think, that the friendship model is very strong here. That I have very different expectations from my Israeli friends than from my American friends. If you ask a random question, you say, okay, if I were now in Russia, not in Russia, different country, I was in Vietnam, I was arrested, and I needed $20,000 to post bail, and I called friends in Israel and I called friends in the US. The friends in Israel, I expect them to get on the first flight and
come and help you,
and come and help.
Support.
My American friends, it's not 100%, but they're much fewer. You would call them and say, I'm really busy. I have other things to do. I have to take the kids from school, and okay. Anyway, I'm just
So
joking.
you
But
wouldn't count on them as much as you'd count on people here, because I think in Israel you do count on your
yeah,
friends and family and on your government, and
that's right.
there's a idea that this is what they're supposed to do,
That's right.
and the
So
feeling in Israel is that they were abandoned twice,
that's right. So
because on
if
the
you
7th
think,
of October
yeah,
the army wasn't there, and now the government's not there to release them.
yeah. So if you think about Entebbe, Entebbe kind of for us is what you
Maybe you
do.
should explain it explain because people
So
don't know.
a flight was kidnapped, taken to Entebbe,
In
landed,
Uganda, yes, in the
hundreds
70s.
hundreds of
Yes,
people. Very quickly, an operation was created, and they just went home to bring everybody back.
yes,
And
yes,
very
sir.
sadly, uh, there were casualty on the people who were releasing the hostages, because this was it was a military operation, but it's like a this is what we do. They capture our people, and we go and we get them back. There's
Yes,
no
they
there's
could do
no
that. Yes.
discussion. Now, of course, Gaza is more complex and so on, but our expectation is that's the incomplete contract. By the way,
Do you
incomplete
think it's a,
contract.
by the way, do you think it's a, if you're talking about rationality and irrationality, what do you think is, I mean, obviously you don't know exactly Netanyahu's motives, or maybe we do know, but um, I mean, it seems like all you need to do is seal the deal. There's a deal on the table, and you need to just sign it and release the. I mean, maybe it's not that simple, but to release them,
Yeah.
and it's not happening. And I think that's what's the anger in Israel is it's simply not happening.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's rational and not rational from Netanyahu perspective, from the country's perspective, and so on. There'll certainly be sacrifices and complexity, and there's lots of assumptions going on. But if you think about long term, what incomplete contracts tells you is that when it's your time to pay, it might not be fun to do it right now, but that's what you do for the long term contract. Now, by the way, politicians don't necessarily think 100 years in advance. They
Yeah,
think
they
about
don't.
the next election. So politicians inherently are not designed to think about the long-term benefit of the country. They are designed to think about the short-term benefit of themselves and their party. But if you think about the Entebbe operation, this is something that this is for us. This is what we thought the contract is, right? And now people are saying, so what is the contract? What is it? I've been doing my side of the contract. What has been happening? Have I been living all these years in an illusion that we were working under this contract, and now all of a sudden I'm waking up?
Yeah.
Let me just say one other thing about since we're talking about. So I'm an academic in an American university, and there were lots of demonstrations and anger, and my kids are Americans, and they suffered. Their mother is Indian Hindu, so they are half Israeli Jewish, half Hindu
They're American.
Indians,
Yeah.
and nevertheless they got really treated very badly by people who called themselves their friends because of their affiliation. They don't have citizens in Israel. They've never voted for this government, but they got bundled into this activity. But anyway, I've been looking at what's happening on American campuses, and I'll take the discussion into a slightly different direction. It has been unbelievably disappointing to see what universities have been doing. So let's take Harvard as an example. You have some of the smartest kids on the planet and some of the smartest faculty on the planet. And you have a university that is a tax-exempt special institution. What should they do? My assumption would that they would say, let's take 2 months and come up with a Harvard approach for peace in the Middle East. We have Israeli students, Palestinian students, Muslim students, Jewish students. We have everybody here. The fact that 3,000 miles away from Gaza, the best they could do is fight and offend each other. That's just terrible. That's just
very
terrible.
sad.
And I think universities have basically betrayed their public position. And I understand why, because if you take an action, let's say they did something, some newspaper reporter might cover them and so on. But I think everybody is just trying to stay under the radar. Everybody's just trying to do the least amount possible, not to interfere, not to do this, not to take a position, just not to make a mistake. And I think, cancel culture has been so pervasive and so aggressive, and everybody is just trying not to make mistakes, that
Instead
people
of
are
maybe
basically
not finding solutions that,
Definitely.
if all of, people around the world would come up with options, what can we do? How can we live here together? How can we solve this dilemma? Put all the energy and everything to finding a solution that will be good for all parties and all sides.
Yeah.
Listen, Dan, we're out of time. Yes, so I
And
think
we haven't solved the Middle East problem yet.
Yes, but I did want to give our listeners a bit of a glimpse of what's going on here in Israel and about the dilemma because we are here in a problem both from Hamas and our neighbors, but also within the country and the government. And I really hope we'll manage to resolve this issue. But so you're writing about it, and I'm going out with my flag and demonstrating about it. So I hope we will see a better future in the near, shortly.
Yeah.
So I basically, do you want a last word, or we just?
No, I just think these are terrible days. These are terrible days. If you think about in general the fight between good and evil, it's something we have to fight, and there's
also a contract because evil we always want, we always think that good is going to will win the evil, but the evil now is stronger.
We have to come together. We have to fight. This is not going to go away, even if the ceasefire right now, which I'm hoping for. I think the world has to figure out how we want to move forward, including strengthening the UN, thinking about more general approaches. What do we do with Iran? What do we do with the Houthis?
Yeah. Okay, well, so I'd like to thank you very much for insightful discussion, and I learned a lot from you. And everyone, Professor Dan Ariely, you can find him on LinkedIn or on the internet. You have a very nice website if you want to read more about you. And I am Michal Heffer, manager of Lichi Translations. Very happy to have hosted this episode of Lichi Translations podcast. And we'll stay tuned for anything else. And I'll post my details if you need any more information, www.lichitranslations.com. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lichi Translations podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or have a translation inquiry, please feel free to visit our website, www.lichitranslations.com, or send me a message via email, lichi@lichi.co.il, or give me a call or WhatsApp message at 972-523-516070. I really look forward to hearing from you. Bye.